Okay, I want to welcome everybody to the May 15th, 2025 meeting of the Seattle Design Commission. Our meetings are recorded on MS Teams and posted on our website at a later date. From 10:30 until noon today, we have a pre-petition review for a proposed street vacation at a site address is 3257 Harbor Avenue Southwest. It's actually the street that's proposed for vacation is a unopened segment, an unimproved segment of Southwest City View Drive. We'll go ahead and we'll start with introductions, and this is a pre-petition review. That means that the applicants have not filed a mass use permit or a petition to vacate. So we won't be taking an action today, but rather it's an opportunity for the commission to provide some early input using the street alley vacation policies to guide that discussion. We'll go ahead and we'll start with introductions with commissioners and then the presenter and others in the room. And we'll start with.
Good morning, Zubin Rao, Architect Commissioner.
Good morning, Molly Spatelnik, Urban Design Commissioner.
Good morning, Caitlin Trum. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Get Engaged Commissioner.
Morning, Phoebe Bogert, Landscape Commissioner.
Brian Markham, Engineering Commissioner.
Good morning, Kevin O'Neill, Transportation Planning Commissioner and Chair.
Ben Hitz, Architect Commissioner.
Ray Gastel, Planner Commissioner.
Doing Miss City at large.
Bradley Corey, being an architects and Bode Development. And some members of our team are here if they'd like to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm Katya and I'm an architectural designer as well.
George Webb, I'm the founder and CEO of Bode.
Thank you.
Beverly Barnett, Seattle Department of Transportation.
Are there going to be anyone else from your team online?
Maybe.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye out, we'll let them in. And the only other question is, was there anyone from the public that you knew that was going to be attending?
Not that we do.
Okay. I think we're ready to go.
Okay.
Oh, I'm Wendy Becker.
Sorry,
Hi. We've been emailing.
sorry, Wendy.
We've never met formally, so it's not to be helpful.
I know. Okay, so I'm gonna walk us through a little bit of background on the site, and then I'll describe the area that we're requesting for the vacation. And then I'll show a little bit about some very early conceptual images that we have, and then we'll talk about the public benefits that we're proposing. As Michael mentioned, the site is located at 3257 Harbor Ave Southwest. This is on the west side of Harbor. It is a completely undeveloped property. It is a steep slope that runs from 30th down to Harbor, and there is a retaining wall that's about 7 to 8 feet tall, maybe down 4 feet for the entire frontage of the site. So it's a pretty inhospitable frontage and not very pedestrian friendly. The site is zoned C155. We have a 55 height limit. We have a floor area ratio of 3.75. And the project's goal is to produce affordable housing on site, performing MHA, performing additional affordable housing beyond that through a series of programs. We haven't yet confirmed the total percentage and the total AMI goals at this point. We're still working on that. But that is the main focus. We're looking at about 166 units, a mix of family size, 2 bedrooms, and smaller 1 bed and studio units. And the building, because the topography is actually 8 stories. So, let's see, cursor, great. I've never presented on a video call in a room. So there are 2 portions of the site, a north and a south. Southwest city view.
It's gonna happen to somebody. Yeah. It's usually me.
I'll beatbox next.
Yeah, you're already starting. Yeah.
Okay, so it kind of bisects the area of land that we're proposing to develop on. We're definitely interested in vacating the entirety of that right of way. It's 2,100 square feet of land. And it drops, as I mentioned, between 30th and Harbor. It is too steep to be used as a street and can instead be used to combine the sites to the north and the south and allow us to make a larger affordable housing project and help activate this sidewalk space and deal with what Seattle's doing with a critical housing shortage. Just to orient you, let me go to full screen. I'll make it faster. Oh, because I started presenting before I did that. That's right. So the site is identified here as number one. We have obviously downtown Seattle, where we're sitting right now. We have Interstate 90, Alki Point, and then Harbor Island. Kind of zooming in on the site here. We are kind of at a termination point of the West Seattle Bridge. Down low as you would head around towards Alki. It's predominantly commercial and industrial land uses. There is some residential here. Everything after that slide is going to be turned the other direction, so everything gets a little bit bigger. So north is now to your left. The uses across the street, there's a storage building, there's a parking lot, there's some condominium and apartment projects nearby, and then behind up the site, up on 30th Avenue, there are actually residential homes. So just orienting you in terms of transportation, and again, finding the site and the right of way for vacation here in the center. We have Southwest City View Street as that area to be vacated. And then we have dedicated bike paths. We have sort of combined bike and sidewalk paths. We have pedestrian connector streets. We obviously have Admiral that comes up the hill. We have the industrial rail line out over here. And then we have the West Seattle Bridge. There's a lot going on at this specific location. Here are some examples of immediate uses, residential, sort of multifamily buildings, the commercial presence as well within the self-storage. And then these are some of the smaller single-family structures, low-rise structures up the hill. The frontage is long enough that it actually takes 2 slides. So this is looking west on Harbor. So you're seeing the multifamily building to our south, and then you're seeing the site area here. And then on the opposite side, this is looking across the street at the bottom. And so you're seeing the kind of parking lot. And then as you head to the south, you're seeing the self-storage. And then this is looking both sides of the 30th Ave frontage. So at the top of the page is looking kind of over the site. And the Southwest City View Street is kind of right here in the center of the double page. And then the Southwest Quarter bounds the site to the left, which is north. And then we're looking at the kind of lower density single family opposite on 30th at the bottom of the page. Predominantly 3-story, 2-story homes. And again, that sort of continues across. And then here you're seeing the back of that multifamily building that is to our south. And so, it gives you an idea of the scale of what is anticipated for our site as well in terms of above 30th. Kind of zooming in on the site, the Southwest Borderway, we've begun some work with SDOT because access for the site is challenging. We need to figure out how to deal with trash, storage, pickup. And so they requested all of that come off of Porter Street and not off of Harbor. There was no parking that they're allowing along the frontage on Harbor. And so basically we're looking to produce kind of continuous frontage that stitches across the Southwest City View Street, right of way with planting strip, sidewalk, and then public benefit within that space. And the only vehicular connection to the site will be really for drop off load and unload or trash will be into Southwest Porter. It's also fairly steep, but it already provides connection to a very sort of rickety public stair here. And that's because it's not as steep as the rest of the site. As you can see, it's quite a bit lower here. It shouldn't be a surprise. The site has pretty incredible views from the West Seattle Bridge to the Space Needle and kind of everything in between, so stadiums and downtown, the mountains beyond. Space Needle. We'll also have very good southern exposure and sort of eastern views downtown. And then as you get above 30th, we get some western light. Okay. This is the site kind of zoomed in. The dashed in area is the Southwest City View Street right of way. It is impossible to utilize currently. It is too steep to turn into anything meaningful. And we've already begun the conversation with SDOT about a public stair being added on Southwest Porter as a way to improve the one that's there. It's actually a requirement on the project. Our goals are to enhance that through some of the public benefits. So here you're seeing Porter. Again, the kind of site area and Southwest City View Street here. Very strong interest to create a kind of stronger presence on our side of the block and to use the building in Porter and then the potential entry location as a kind of mid-block activator and connection. Across the way, we have the infrastructure of the bike pedestrian pass and then the connection up to Alki Promenade as well as Jack Block Park. All right, so I'm gonna start to go into the proposed public benefits. We have a slide that shows the three together, and then I'll go into each one individually. So as I mentioned before, there is a public stair that's required. And the goal is to build that stair into a retaining wall up at 30th, have it be a switchback that lands at a platform. And the thought is that that platform, instead of just being a stair landing, can become a viewpoint to downtown, into the water, and a small kind of sitting area and mini park space. The second benefit proposed is a series of planters. Our hope is that we can develop culturally relevant imagery on these to this specific location, to the sort of history of West Seattle and this particular part of it. And those would be along that stair up here, and then really along the entirety of the harbor frontage. Because we're proposing residential uses at ground floor, we're pulling the whole building back 10 feet. And so there's space on top of the right-of-way space where we could add these and help soften and create kind of a transition to the sidewalk. The third, which is perhaps the biggest of our benefits within the project, is to actually create a stopping point along the path and have it become the equivalent of a POP, so a privately owned public space that serves as both an entry courtyard, kind of harkens back to the Southwest City View right of way. It's just shifted a little bit to work in the building. And then from the streetscape, it'll actually end up breaking the building into two masses. And this is full height. So then sort of zooming in, and these are images are kind of, hints at what could be possible. So the stair having some kind of textured surface, with landscaping as a, sort of place for neighbors to come and gather, or place just simply to pause as you're working your way down, which is a pretty long staircase. We like the idea of the public viewpoint because we have so much to look at from the site. These are just some examples of planters that could be kind of a hint at what's possible. Again, trying to enhance the pedestrian experience. Right now, it's challenged at best. Use this as a way to activate the streetscape, give something to the community that can be visually, kind of inspiring, and I think also hopefully informative and teach. And then the last one is the courtyard. And we've pulled a couple of examples of ones around the city, of actual POPs at the city, Seattle. And, our goal here is to where we can integrate art and other features. Maybe it's bike racks, sort of sculptural. Maybe it's something on the wall. Maybe it's things within the ground space. But there would be something of kind of merit and intrigue that would actually pull people in here. So it's not just a building entrance. So just sort of zooming back out, getting the three different locations. So the kind of viewpoint, the frontage, planters, and then the courtyard space. I'm going to walk through building plans, and then I will take you to some diagrams that will explain the kind of massing strategy and hopefully respond to the rest of what I just presented. So Southwest City View Street is kind of right in through here. And so we're carving away a pretty significant chunk of the building all the way up as a way of sort of acknowledging that street not being here and also adding public space on the site in the location where the street could once have been. It is our primary entry as well. And there are units that are around it. And then these are the potential areas for patios for those units with the planters separating them. All our bike parking is proposed at this lower level, along with other sort of backup house utility spaces. The second floor is where we would pull in from Porter and then have access into the trash room. It's a deal to navigate, and again, we're working with civil engineers on this already. To help kind of accentuate the recess, we're actually pushing 4 units out, let's say 5-6 feet on either side as a way of adding yet another response to the location of the right-of-way that we're asking to vacate, and breaking up that facade as we work our way kind of from south to north. So that carries all the way up. Level 3, 5, 6, and 7 are effectively this sort of typical floor plan where you have units along the back, units sort of at the corner, and then towards the east. 4 is unique in that that's at the level of the 30th Avenue South sidewalk. And so we're picking a location where we can come into the building from the 30th Ave South side. It is not meant to be a primary entrance. It can be a door in or out for residents coming to the building. I should point out, in terms of architectural circulation, that there's a primary core on the north side, there's kind of secondary core on the south side. As we continue up, you'll understand why this one is here. So then 5 through 7 are the same as floor 3. We get units across the back, the notch out recess, and then the projections. And so the 8th floor is completely the most unique, where everything kind of north of the elevator becomes roof deck, and the 2 primary spaces adjacent to it can be amenities for the building, whether it's a gym or a kitchen or a living space. These spaces can both activate the roof deck and be seen from the roof deck, and sort of pull units away from that space. These are very preliminary. They don't have grade really even shown, but you're seeing the kind of hollow out pretty much at the midpoint of the site for the hops, and then the 2 areas that kind of push out in front. You're seeing the drop down at the 8th floor, front and the back. And grade is really up here. You can see the door. So more than half the building is below grade from the 30th Avenue. So kind of summary in terms of the strategy, we have our north site, we have our south site, we have City View, Southwest City View Street in the middle, proposing to stitch this all together into one contiguous site. Coming up from our bounds, we have no setbacks except for the 10-foot from the right of way. We are actually pulling in from all sides. And then we end up looking at how that right of way can influence the project and create some method of connectivity and reference back to it, which is this sort of removal. We start to refine the massing, and then we end up with our lower deck at the corner at Southwest Porter, and then our main entry flanked by the 2 projections out. Thank you.
Shane?
Yeah, I was just looking, I was just gonna click to see. Thank you, Brad. Thank you. I don't think there's anyone attending
That's
online.
what I was.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have, the reason, we want to make sure that anyone who's attending that wants to make public comment, that we give them up to 2 minutes of public comment.
Okay.
And I'm assuming you're speaking of your client and all that. Okay.
Do you want to make any more?
No, no.
Okay.
Covered it all. Thank you,
Okay.
Brad.
Before we start our deliberation and questions, anything from city staff?
I'll just make a couple really brief things, because I think we're all here. I think this pre-petition meeting is a great opportunity to hear your really, even loosely formed questions and ideas that can help guide them as they move forward. We've had 1 or 2 meetings on this, and I've not seen the current public benefit proposal. But I think one thing that's really obvious is that it's a great site for housing. It's a very difficult site for access. So one of the things in assessing public benefit within SDOT, we want to make sure that access, services, and the impacts from the project are fully addressed. And I think that will guide what we look at for public benefit. Some of the newer things, I think we'll all be interested in what, your guidance. I did want to note, though, that I have highlighted for the both team my concerns that the stairway connection would ever rise to the level of being public benefit. It just seems so functional and so necessary for a large scale apartment that doesn't have parking to have that connectivity for the tenants. So it would have to be kind of Versailles treatment, I think, to get me into public benefit territory for that. And just depending on guidance from you and what the team does, I think another thing for me is wanting to see more specificity on community engagement on the public benefit. And I think particularly for that stair climb, if uphill neighbors said, oh, wow, we love it, that could really have an impact on my concern that it's more functional than amenity. But we don't have that to date. But otherwise, there are some challenges, but they're really working to address them. We'll see what challenges you guys face.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, so thank you. So I think that's helpful. So we're not, to be clear, we're not taking an action today. This is a pre-petition. If this does come back to us, we will ultimately take an action on both the public trust and the public benefit side. But this is, as Beverly said, and Michael said, this is a really good opportunity for us to see the project, ask any clarifying questions we have, and then provide some early guidance. So that's really our intent today. So first, in terms of clarifying questions, what we'll do, I think, is we'll just go around like we typically do. I think for the discussion, let's just do that as a group. I think that we'll want to array it around the criteria that that are listed in the staff report. So in terms of clarifying questions, we usually start with Subin, so I'm going to change it up and start down here. So, Subin, you ready to go? Just mixing it up or just shaking it up a bit. So any clarifying questions for the?
Yes,
today?
the project is not 100% affordable housing, correct?
It may be. That's something that we're still working through. That accurate thing.
Yes, definitely.
So it might end
might
up
be
being
on
100%
there.
affordable housing. And my other question was related to what was just said. Has there been any sort of public engagement with the neighborhood, the community on existing condition, maybe some desires, some challenges with that street and what everyone's dealing with?
That would have been before my involvement, so.
There was a survey that was put out. Kai, do you know the details of that? Karen on our team is the one who just got the survey required for the design review process before we opted for, and we think we'll do the design review exemption to expedite permitting on this project. But when we started that process, we did do a public survey. I don't know what the feedback was, but there was nothing significant or negative that was brought to my attention, at least.
It would have
Probably
been,
find those results.
it would have been the full early community outreach through the EEG process.
And was it pulled into the design here?
I don't believe there was feedback. Yeah. It might have been on target.
Can I add to that question just because it's very related? So the design review exemption, is that requiring a certain level of affordability to have that exemption?
Yeah, so.
So what's
if you
that
If you
amount?
perform MHA on site, that is the current pathway. If you're 100% affordable, that is also a pathway. And so affordable housing developers have that pathway, and market rate developers have that pathway if they choose to perform. That sunsets in August. It's been in place for 2 years, and I can't get an answer as to whether it's gonna keep going or not.
So the master use permit will be in on July 30th.
There won't be one if it's, right, that's the issue. So that's the thing we don't know. Otherwise, yes, there's a much more involved process.
I would just add that, the vision of our company is affordable living for everyone. So regardless of mandated affordability, the design is intended to be affordable by design. And so that's where we're trying to go with the project overall and all of our projects. And as Brad mentioned, that August 13th is the date that the sunset. So that's a very important date for us internally. We have to have our building permit intake done by then. If council doesn't take action before that, it's very time sensitive for us to reduce kind of the planning by 18 to 24 months that the design review process takes. So very important part of our program to make that date.
Any other questions?
One more thing. So I think I heard that right. There's no parking in the
There's no
building.
parking in the building.
And has there been any study on like the parking capacity of the neighborhood for potentially 160 units?
I don't believe that's happened yet. Yeah. But the one thing I can say is the site is mapped frequent transit. So it has an allowance of 50% reduction. And then for every unit that is affordable at 80% of AMI or lower, those are not required to have parking. So that is the strategy. So a lot of this building is going to be affordable.
Thanks.
Well, more than that.
Appreciate it.
Can I add on to the community engagement question?
Sure.
What was the survey asking? Were the public benefits shown to the community, and what were you like looking for through the survey?
So at the time of that, it was part of the EDG mandated early community outreach. So the decision to do all of this, I don't believe was like the public benefits. We've interviewed since we did that a couple months ago. So they haven't seen these. The public has not seen the benefits proposed.
What did you get out of the survey?
Yeah, I don't have the answers. I apologize.
Our team member who conducts those surveys is unfortunately not.
You're right.
But we can check on that.
Can you email that and ask her? Send me that feedback. We're here for a little bit.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Ray?
Yeah, I just had some sort of circulation and dimension questions. Are there any street doors for any of the units?
There are no street
There are no
doors
street
planned.
doors. Okay.
There are patios
Uh,
that will then be screened so if you're saying street doors, like they wouldn't be entrances.
Not entrances.
It might be a
but
back
the ground
door.
floor ones, either on the first or the fourth floor, or maybe just the.
Just the first.
Just on the harbor.
Yeah. And that's not fully decided at this point.
That's sort of
Yeah.
figuring it out, but there's also this 10-foot setback, but that seems to be, that is pretty much decided.
That's mandated by code.
That's
for
code,
residential
that's code
use.
mandated, so
Right.
that's-
So that is
yeah.
decided.
And then the sidewalk width there is,
I mean, we'll be building a new one that'll match the required SDOT of 6 feet for the planting strip. So it'll be a minimum of 6 feet, and then we'll have the additional distance between the property line and the sidewalk plus the 10-foot behind. So there's gonna be a lot of space.
well, I understand, it's just it's a budget question of the sort of West Seattle's waterfront. The way people move along these, especially the relatively dense building without parking, but it's, because you don't have to put in parking garages or curb cuts for them though. Which I noticed. But, and then the other one is just are your floor to floors like 9 foot?
The floor to floors at this point are around 10,
And, okay, so that's your working assumption.
and that's why we've set the roof deck at the 8th floor.
Right.
So that we can have our highest occupiable floor be the deck and the
Right.
unit. So that level is 75 feet, and that is
That's driving.
that's
what happens
driving
below.
everything,
Right, of course.
literally.
Yeah.
That and you.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that, just to that point, because but the zoning limitation is 55 there, so but with the slope, you're able to work
Yeah.
around, obviously you're constrained by the zoning code regardless, but it just,
We're basically 40 feet at the back and.
Back to back meaning 30th.
At 30th.
Okay.
And we're probably over 85 at the
At
front.
Harbor, but that,
And we step
that
down.
meets the 55 foot.
Yes, average grade. It's measured from the average height of the site. And it's not an obvious, like the slope is not parallel up the hill.
You're right.
It's pretty complex.
Just a note, I did find the community outreach report, it's prepared, and the question was asked about, as part of the right of education, we're committed to providing services and improvements that would have a positive impact on neighborhood. How can we most effectively contribute? So it was asked, and we had 4 responses to the survey, and those are all documented in this report. We can share that back. I assume there's a follow-up. We can share the report with.
Yeah, we'll see the project again. So
Okay.
they should need to move forward. Ray, any other questions?
I'm curious how, you can explain the rationale of putting the carve out on the harbor side, rather than the 30th Avenue side, just because the residential, you have a long block, relatively flat wall on 30th facing the residences, and then the carve out is in the on the harbor view side. And then my other question would be is like, how much do you gain by, I understand there's probably an extra elevator and probably 2 stairs if you didn't have the street vacation. I'm just kind of curious, like what you guys are gaining by vacating the alley, 16,000 square feet, or if you can quantify that.
Sure. I'm typing the questions just so I have them in front of me. So the carve out on Harbor, it's a much more publicly visible portion of the project. It's not the only publicly visible portion of the project. It's a much bigger wall. It's probably twice as much wall. I will be honest, we did consider doing something on the 30th side where the city street break could be. And that's still something we can consider doing. We felt that at 4 stories, that we could deal with it with materiality and texture, whereas at 8 stories, breaking it was a lot more critical. I think also there isn't an entrance from that side. I think it's just a back door, and it's not intended to be an entrance. We're not trying to have 166 units worth of people coming in from that door. We really want to celebrate the entry. So I think it's doing multiple things on that side. The benefit of vacating the alley is it's multiple. Bode's mission, as George said, is to create affordable living for all. If we do this as 2 smaller projects, it's more expensive to produce. It's harder to produce. The right of way, frankly, isn't doing anything at all right now, and it frankly never can. It could be another stair. That's really all it could be. And we're proposing to put one in on the other side where there already is one and where the neighborhood would like to see it improved. So it does give us an additional 2,000 square feet of footprint. We are pulling the building in, as I said, from all sides and trying to modulate it to be responsive. So it's not as if it is a kind of I think the best way to say it is it allows the building to achieve its goals in a much more meaningful way. Housing is very expensive right now to produce. It's very hard to produce, it's very hard to permit. So doing it one time across a bigger site is a much more effective way to bring it to market, especially when the market rate developer is trying to make affordable units.
Okay, I will defer questions. So Brandon, any questions?
I guess I had a question about sort of future neighborhood. What's the extent of the zoning, and do we expect bigger developments up the hill, and will they want a future stair someday down this potential site for a future stair? Do you understand that question?
Well, I think I do. You're saying, will there be some updates to zoning in the future that requires a stair at City View Street versus the one in Southwest Border?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. I don't.
Is it single family up
It's
on
single family
30th
above.
up and,
Yeah.
and
And-
only dense on Harbor.
Correct. And, you know, right now, the state's passed a law. The city is pushing forward with the interim legislation to address that. And then there's a future phase 1 and phase 2. So there will be higher density allowed in the neighborhood residential zone after June 30th. And so I think that's what we're expecting in terms of future uses and capacity. Again, we are being asked to provide a stair at southwest border. So this would be a very short distance away to produce another stair, which I don't think would be requested of a project.
It depends on your density, but I appreciate it. It just, this is the not reversible choice, right? Like,
Understood.
Once this is vacated, it's incumbent.
So I guess I would answer it to say, I don't think there's enough users to require 2 stairs that close together. I don't make the policy.
Understood. I think that's it for questions. I have multiple comments, but that's a different phase.
Thought I would just ask a little bit more about study of the public open space. You have a viable kind of a solution of the notch, which really does help express entry, which is like something the city is always looking for, that you understand where the lobby is, where the front door is. But that feels very much like a lobby space and not like a public open space. So the question is, did you explore other places where that public space could articulate itself maybe more robustly on the site?
We actually had the entry at the corner and we moved it to the notch for everything you just said in between the 2 parts of the question. And it would have felt absurd to create the public space and not have it be the entry to the building. So I think the intention is the public space aligns with the right of way that we're asking to vacate. That seems to us to be a kind of nice sort of thought process and alignment with if it had become a public space, right? And then in terms of its size and, effect, I think that can be discussed, but that does seem like the best location for it. It can be larger. We're already producing a 10-foot space across all frontage. So I moved the lobby from the corner when I started getting involved with the project to the place of the public space.
And when you said the corner, was it the north corner?
The north corner, the chamfer.
Yeah. And do you have any more kind of articulation of what you mean by overlook on the stairs that you were asked or required to?
Yeah, so I'd like to do my best to clarify. I wasn't at all of the early meetings on the stair. Our understanding is the portion that is not the big shaded pink area, this thing is required. And so we're proposing to add viewpoint at the landing to expand the landing by, 300%, 400%.
But that viewpoint is lower than where you start the stairs at.
That is correct.
So it's not as good of a viewpoint as the top of the stairs.
Yes, that is correct. It is looking over parking lot across the street. It's looking over all this. So there's nothing to obstruct its view. It would be better higher. So that could be a discussion. Shift the position of the stair, relocate the viewpoint. We added it as a place halfway up the stair as a place to pause for someone. It's a big stair.
I think I'll pass it now.
So Caitlin, for just a quick pause, we have Jackson from ESTA, I think online.
Hi, Jackson.
And I believe he has more information about Brian's question relating to the stair, if I'm understanding the chat correctly. So Jackson, do you have anything to add at this point?
I'm happy to wait if Michael wanted to get to me later. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I think if it pertains to the question Brian asked, we can go ahead and get that information.
Yeah, I can just briefly say the question was, would future development up the hill west of 30th be required to provide that staircase in city view if the zoning was to change? And the answer to that is no. The only development that might be required to improve city view would be the north site of the current project. So if this project didn't happen and the north site was to redevelop, or the south site was to redevelop first, the one fronting city view would be required to provide a staircase in that right of way. But future development in the neighborhood west of 30th would not have to do that.
Can I ask a clarification? If this development goes forward as 2 buildings, then they are required to put a stair down that corridor?
Correct, yes.
Jackson, since I wasn't at the initial meeting, does that preclude the one that's in Southwest Porter that's already being planned for, or would there be 2?
There would be one required in both right of way. If the right of way remains public right of way, then SDOT would seek to require a staircase in both of those streets. I do want to be clear that there's a relief process with SDCI that any potential development could argue that it was impossible to put a staircase in city view, and there'd be a whole engineering conversation about whether or not that was accurate that we haven't had. So I can't say what the outcome of that would be, but just facially, we would try to require the staircase.
Okay, so I'm going to try to ask another clarifying question. The clarifying question. So if the vacation doesn't happen, which is really the public trust question that we'll ultimately get, there, Jackson, I think what I'm hearing you say is a staircase would be required in that right of way.
At both.
But the right of way in Porter, would the applicant have to also improve that staircase, or would it just be, what would the applicant be required to put in just a staircase in the existing right of way and not touch the Porter Street one?
So if the vacation doesn't happen, we have 2 sites, right? We have the south site and the north site. The south side only has frontage on city view, so development on the south side would only be required to improve city view. The north site has frontage on both city view and Porter, so a development on the north side would be required to improve both city view and Porter. If the south side went first and improved city view, then the north side would only have to improve Porter. But that's the general idea.
Okay.
But one could apply for relief.
Yeah,
right.
I understand it's still,
right.
But
I'm
it's
learning
helpful
this
for us to understand what the code requires.
And we've done a stair before on a street that was too steep to be a street after trying to make it a street. So it's a great thing to add when required. Okay.
Jackson, could you indulge me and could you let everybody know what your role is at SDOT?
Oh, I'm sorry. I know I was I had to join half an hour late. I apologize. Jackson Cook, SDOT Street Use. I'm the development review supervisor, so we manage early design guidance on street improvement permits, and we also coordinate with SDCI.
Thanks, Jackson.
Yeah, sorry.
Jackson, very helpful. Thank you. Okay, Caitlin, back to you.
My question is regarding the viewpoint. I was wondering how, if someone was in a wheelchair, how they have access to the viewpoint and enjoy this public benefit.
I'm typing your question, sorry. They would have no way of accessing that viewpoint, right? I mean, unless we put in a lift, or put in one of those lifts that come up the stair. So if we move the viewpoint to the top, they could access it from 30th.
Has there been conversation about a ramp?
It wouldn't work. I can tell you now, having had to do it at the Red Robin site, there's not enough weight.
I don't think you
can't get down.
It's 40 feet. It would be
You can't.
A lot of switchback.
So there hasn't been, but it won't work. And we need to improve Porter for the access to the adjacent sites because they use it as a driveway. We'll need it for trash pickup because SP a truck pulled into a kind of inset curb and grab trash from her.
Okay, thanks. That was my only question.
Yeah, I think the question is a good one, and maybe the viewpoint should be higher.
Thanks, Caitlin. Molly?
So my question is really related to how this then informs massing and affordability. But I'm curious, looking at the plans, it feels like a lot of the units are very deep units. with bedrooms that don't have windows. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about is this a borrowed light strategy? How are we thinking about how to make those units livable, functional,
So,
legal?
no, they're legal. Is there a question of them being legal?
No, they're legal.
They're legal.
Or you can make them unlawable.
They're legal.
You just have to have like.
Well, there's the borrowed
Yeah, I
light
mean,
strategy.
it's an interesting thing that they are legal. That's part of what drove the notch, to be totally honest. I'm gonna go to a typical floor. We were talking internally about how many of the 2 bedrooms had light into both bedrooms. I'll sort of go off track a tiny bit. So because of the commitment to produce affordable units, the Office of Housing also reviews the units. Does anybody do projects that go through Office of Housing okay. So they have requirements about daylight. And so if it's an open 1 bedroom, meaning the bedroom doesn't reach the exterior wall, then there has to be a window in the exterior wall and a window in the open bedroom, or an opening that faces the window. And so you can't do that with a 2 bedroom. It just doesn't work. So we have been looking at different strategies to the units. Again, we're fairly early in the process, but getting it to where the kitchen isn't on this wall, and to where this bedroom rotates. And so you would get light into this bedroom through that wall, and you get light into this bedroom through its portion that looks past that wall. And there could be a small dining or a little office space in the widened portion of the core. The notch does create a far significant reduced number of units that have this issue. And so the percentage of units that are affordable, all of them will have access to light for Office of Housing standards. The rest that maybe don't perform to that level will simply meet building code, which does not require windows.
So for the ones that are not adjacent to the notch, the ones that are more of the bowling alley style,
These, yeah.
how are those
can't
second
perform.
bedrooms?
Those can't perform for Office of Housing unless we turn a bedroom and move a closet, which is something we've drawn and just isn't in today's presentation. It's not fleshed out. So we're looking at solutions to it.
And for the ones on the back wall for the first 4th floor, none of them get any daylight. Is that correct?
There are no units on those floors unless it's pulled back and then there's some.
You're asking about the second.
We don't
bedroom,
have a
not the-
section through. So basically the first floor has no units back there because it's too low. The second level does, and so there are another 10-foot setback. And so there's windows.
So the second floor is not underground anymore?
It's underground. It just has a large light wall.
There's a big retaining wall, 10-foot gap, and then your building,
Mhm.
correct?
And so
And that's at 2 stories.
these bedrooms, what's the
That's what he's.
lighting strategy for this?
That's what I'm saying. Under building code, there doesn't need to be one that is natural light. Shocking to me as well. And under the Office of Housing, if they become units, the Office of Housing looks at for performance for the project, we will have to have strategies that they have windows that look at the big window. And the intention is that the street's going to be a big window.
Okay, that's my only question.
Yeah, I mean, we looked at other ways to do this, but those are the solutions we've come up with so far. That there's the large recess for the units on either side. There's the units at the end. There's units all along the back, which are landscape style instead of portrait style. There are units at the corner.
Buildings get deeper when it gets to 30th? Like,
No.
Does it?
It stacks.
But you have a door there, so you have a little bridge.
Yes, there's a bridge.
I didn't pick up on the bridge.
Yes.
There, that's a
Yeah.
little bridge. Ah,
Yeah, the building, part of the reason the building is as tall as it is it's pulled in from all sides.
for your FAR.
The FAR.
So
I didn't catch the bridge.
one more question.
That's interesting.
Did the team study 2 separate buildings at any point?
I'd have to look to the rest
Do-
of the.
do
I
like
have not
early
been part
pricing?
of that study.
So I'm really curious what drove, was it from day one that
Yes,
this was going
from
to
day
be?
one.
Yes.
Bargaining?
Again, for the reasons I said earlier, it just, producing housing in Seattle right now, if anybody's doing this work, it is incredibly difficult. Permitting costs, financing, all of it. Any advantages that we can create and then provide advantages for is a benefit.
Molly, good. Sue?
That's it for me.
Yeah, so I guess only question, just to clarify on the backside, there's basically like a two-story well. So from the street, you'll kind of see a guardrail or something like that.
Yes.
And then there'll be like kind of a 20-foot deep pit.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
So you said the connection was on the fourth,
That's correct.
so it's a 4-story well?
It's just the third and second floor is the well.
Because the ground floor doesn't have units on the backside. So
And the fourth floor is at the level
I get you.
generally.
That's clear.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
for
And,
me.
and we've done this for 1-story wells in places before.
Yeah, understood.
I have one real quick question.
Okay,
So
then I have a question too, but go ahead.
five stories of wood, 3 levels of concrete to get your 8 stories.
It's probably going to be 2 stories of concrete and 6 stories of.
Okay. With their
Yeah.
retaining.
So the question I have, and I know we're early in the public benefit discussion, but just since this is a lot of units and no parking requirement, I understand that's what the land use code allows. With regard to the public benefit, did you or have you considered any broader circulation improvements? I mean, obviously the stairway provides some of that, but there's also a view enhancement element of that. Improvements to nearby transit stops, improvements to the trail connection, which is right across the street. I mean, are there any broader circulation improvements that you considered or have considered so far?
Yeah, we actually, in a meeting not too long ago, we did talk about what would happen if we tried to make improvements to Jack Block Park, for instance. And I think there was concern that that might be hard to do, dealing with parks. So I think our feeling was we'd rather try to keep it within the agencies we're already dealing with, to be really frank, which will be SDCI, SDOT, and SBU, and City Light. So we chose to not engage with parks for that reason primarily. I think we also thought it was a little far away for the benefit for the project. And so we were looking at things that were much more local to where the project is, because it really feels like that's where the void is. The park's already fairly successful. The pathway is already fairly successful. This side of Harbor it's not pedestrian friendly, and it's not, we're going to hopefully make big improvements that make it much more enjoyable to be on that side of the street.
Are there transit stops on Harbor or 30th near the project?
We can look into that.
There's already a small, I would doubt.
Okay, so thank you. I think we're good. Any other burning questions anybody has that haven't been asked? Okay, then. So again, I think our role now as we move into the deliberation, we're not taking a formal action today, but we do want to, if any recommendations or comments that people have, we want to sort of pass those on. So I think what we'll do is we'll try to organize those around the specific categories that we will look at when this comes back for the public trust, which are access and circulation, utilities, free speech and public assembly, open space, light and air, views, and then land use and urban form. So I think I think it'd be best to maybe try to array our comments around those. So let's start with, yeah, I think we could array our public benefit comments around those categories, but if there's anything additional with public benefit that stands out, that's great. I agree with that.
Brandon, could you put up the site plan up?
Yeah, I think that would be.
Maybe just put up the site plan for orientation.
That's one.
Just a large one. That's fine. That's fine. That's the basic. Yeah, thank you.
So first and I'm just going to open it up. So please raise a hand if you have a comment or recommendation. So for access circulation, any comments or thoughts or concerns?
I think we talked about the stair on Porter and how that mid-level thing is not accessible to the general pop, you know, wheelchairs, etc. It's also not a better view than what you would get out of at the top. I think just thinking about that, there is modifications there that would be recommended. To me, it seems like we have to do that. It's not a public benefit, like that stair has to be reinstated.
But the overlook is
The
not.
overlook could be the public benefit, but it doesn't seem very public at mid-height. Nor does it seem very reasonable at mid-height.
Yeah, I would add to that, I think if the staircase and that platform is part of the public benefit, I think what's really important for us to understand ultimately is what would the code require? And then what are you doing over and above that specifically to make it a broader public benefit? And that's still not, and I understand it's early on, but that's still not really clear to me. And I think we'll need to understand that ultimately, where we going to consider it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that we do understand that the stair is required, so that's sort of, I think it's the augmentation around the required stair to make that a better stair would be the kind of public benefit. Like, I feel like that, you know, so I think that there is actually quite a bit of viability in that overlook being a public benefit, but to Caitlin's point, like, it's not accessible now, and then to, you know, then go into the viewpoint, so this is gonna montage circulation and view and look and like light and air, but the views would be much, you know, much more better afforded at the top, right? So there's so many more benefits that could, I think, leverage this much further.
And then I think honestly, it gets into a review of that right away, and you're putting the main circulation right past your trash room, and how are you dealing with that, right? Like it comes with challenges that need review in itself. Because we are asking the public to walk that corridor that is your main trash interface with the city.
Can I ask a question? Are you suggesting that the staircase begins closer to the trash room? Or is current configuration as fine? Because I kind of think that's, maybe I'm just reading something into it. If the stair began closer to the trash room, or is the current configuration not, it's fine?
Well, it's pretty constrained, I would say, in the trash room. I don't know how you would start. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like you
Yeah.
would move.
Yeah,
up.
you would move
Move
up
up
and
alongside the
Bring it
building.
down a little
Yeah.
closer to the right of way to get.
Right, well, yeah, if you started it back there, so then you'd be able to rise, have a midpoint landing. You would
Right.
certainly need to have a landing, it just wouldn't be your primary, and it could still be a moment to pause midpoint, and then it would afford a bigger plaza. I mean, I think there's a number of studies that can articulate how that stair works better.
I think it's a public stair, and you're gonna have to review it for a number of things coming up, right? I don't see it as a public amenity enhancement. I think it's just something that needs to happen.
And it then lands, like you're saying, near the trash room, also near the vehicle logistics that happen, which I hate to then bring this additional piece of public benefit into this, but you mentioned studying the corner for something public benefit related compared to that building entrance. And from my perspective, a notch in the middle of the building, while it's having a lot of benefits on the development and is allowing some of that light access to the units and just creating a, you know, nicer mid-block entrance that gave you great units on that corner instead and gave you great light access on that corner. I do feel that if you have a public stair coming down that corner down on Harbor is actually your more public moment. So you could say there's public benefit at the top at this overlook, and you have the stair that's part of the requirements of the project. And then is there something public that's happening when I land at the bottom of that stair? Seems more public to me than a building entrance notched into a building being called public, because that's always going to feel like it's owned by the building to that lot line.
That was my next point. 100%. I mean, I think you have a really strong narrative that you can build on the public space if it were looked at the corner and completely, I think, I don't, to your point, the point before was that like it was absurd to take the public space away from the lobby. I don't think it's absurd. I think that happens quite often, that the public space can be divorced from the lobby entrance and you still have that lobby entrance. And I think that's a really strong, it's a strong move. It helps you articulate the building. It brings light and air, right? It defines the end point of entry. It's not really going to be a hangout space, I think, for the building residents either, because it is facing the building across the street. It's east facing. At the end of the day, you've got a tall building. It's going to be shaded. It's a good entry, and I think it's a good addition to circulation and improvement of that streetscape, without a doubt. But it's not going to be like your open space. Whereas on the northeast side there, where you have an potential eroded corner, you have a whole public access story that you can build upon and have more light and air and much more clearly public space that doesn't feel conflated with the building entry.
So just to clarify, you said the suggestion is that maybe the public benefit for that move to that end of the.
Yes, I think it's like a strong look at the whole public benefit on that north side of the building, and it takes into account amplification and betterment of the stairs that are required, adding a better overlook that is accessible and that actually takes advantage of views, and that is a new amenity for the neighborhood, and then it connects to something at the base. And then right there you have like a connected logical story.
And I do want to reaffirm that does not mean it wasn't a good idea to move the entry mid-building. I think that's great for the project that the entry moved to that notch, but the public benefit itself in the corner is appropriate.
Yeah, I'm, maybe this is a little bit more blunt, but I don't see any of these as public amenities. I think these are building setbacks, building lobby, getting light to some of the units, right? Like these are all sort of project requirements. The only thing that's an add is the viewpoint. Everything else is a must-have for the project. FAR requires it. We want a lobby entrance, but there's just so many things. I mean, I do want to say the opposite. The public benefit is that we get more affordable housing. And so to me, this is more a question of vacation value versus the public house, affordable housing, right? Like I don't think a planter is worth a vacation of an alley, but I think maybe public housing, it's right, like affordable housing. And so to me, that's where I'm considering. Everything else on this, except for the viewpoint, is not really an amenity for the public.
That's, I think, what we were saying also, that north corner would actually have an amenity, not just what's shown on the screen, but you're transitioning actual viable space there. Yeah, those are all good points.
But I also agree, Brian. I think a lot of my questions and your questions as well about the affordability of the units, I think it is going to be meaningful to understand what level of affordability the project is proposing, as well as what level of affordability is expected and to how long a duration in the future for the public to give up a right of way of that nature. And there are very different expectations on affordable projects compared to more market rate projects, because we know that a lot of broader public benefits may be challenging to pencil with an affordable building, that with market rate rents, you may be able to do some of these things. And so I think it's very important how affordable these units are.
Well, and to put it into perspective, right, it's 2,000 square feet of vacation times 8 floors, 16,000, right? Like how many apartments is that?
I mean, the FAR is 3.75, so figure it's about 4 times that area is given to the project as usable area. Some of it's exempt, maybe it's for 4.5 times.
But this stripe particularly is not, I guess your FAR is overall, so when you do vacate this, then you have to shrink your building back a little bit more.
The stripe is producing 3.75 times that footprint. Worth the building plus the areas that are exempt below grade. So I mean, what's your not grade units?
Yeah.
I understand that.
But it's, you know, it's definitely 10 units.
Yeah, probably more.
That's a value.
So I think this is a good discussion around I guess, but question back to staff. To what extent is affordable housing or units a public benefit? Is it something we consider as a public benefit? Is it something we can or should consider?
Yeah, the pre-petition policies do provide that an element of public benefit can be the public good provided by low-income housing. I think what we're looking at there is really kind of the definition, and that's that all of this discussion around, is it workforce, is it market rate, is it lower cost because it's across the street from
Self-storage.
work facility, so it does make a difference, but even then, even if this is, we're just closing out a project for Mount Baker Housing, Grand Street Commons, and they did a pretty significant public benefit, even though that was a fully guaranteed, supported low-income housing that was supported by city housing dollars.
Right.
So it's never standalone, but it is a factor, and I think, it's perfectly on point to talk about the number of units that are affordable. But yeah, it is definitely.
I think what I'm trying to understand truthfully is the vacation allows for a larger building. It allows for more units. How much of a factor is that for us to consider? I mean, I think we just need clarity on that, as we look at
I
the.
don't think the council policies necessarily provide clear direction to the design commission about the question about the relative value of affordability. It does certainly put that issue before the council. Because just as a practical matter, you're charged with looking at, if you lose the right of way, how do you get to the site? What happens to the utilities? I think it's completely, if you want to make a statement about affordability, I think you should, to help the council later on understand why in this case you were supporting the project in terms of it being a good thing to do. But then we also want to get back and look at, well, how is the public realm better as a result of this project?
And this isn't subsidized affordable
Right,
housing,
yeah, I understand.
which makes it a lot more difficult.
So back to access and circulation. So I guess my comment or recommendation would be, given you've got the harbor frontage and then the 30th frontage, which is kind of where the neighborhood is, up the hill there. As you think about as the public benefit conversation evolves with the good guidance of FSOT staff, I would encourage looking at adjacent transit stops, adjacent neighborhood access points. Are there opportunities to do broader improvements? Does it make sense to look at a wider street frontage or setback along Harbor, for example? That's a common public benefit that people look at. I just, so since we're not seeing a lot of circulation related public benefit other than the staircase, and because you've got sort of a unique site with kind of access on both sides, I would just encourage the team to kind of look at as you do your public outreach, ask the neighborhood, are there access improvements or circulation improvements that would be desirable for the adjacent neighborhood, on either side. I think that would just be a comment I would make. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I feel like we haven't really talked too much about going up to Admiral yet. And I think that's maybe something important to understand, like how many people are going to want to walk up to catch the bus
Exactly.
up there. And it was kind of mentioned that to the extent that any residents will have cars, they'll be parking in that tiny little
Right.
kind of dead end loop neighborhood and they'll be accessing from that side. So I mean, I think like, none of those little streets have sidewalks. They're all very narrow. I think even for the existing residents of that neighborhood, there's not good access up to Admiral. So I mean, it seems like one thing this project could potentially take on is just improving the connection from Admiral to Harbor sort of for everybody, for the neighborhood. Like maybe instead of focusing on the lookout, they build a sidewalk up City View or something, like I think there could be a way to extend public benefit to the area that would be more for the neighborhood as opposed to the residents of this particular development.
I will
And
note,
kind of
I have
building-
tried,
Say, building on that, like who is the public for this
Right.
project? Is it the residents or is it the neighborhood or is it?
And I do,
For public benefits, typically the public, correct?
Like, but, yeah,
But it's defining who that public
Who would
is.
utilize it.
Are you gonna
The
focus
residents are
your
public.
benefit on the single family homes and the people that actually live right there? Or are you talking about the people that use the transit stops? And those might be the same, but they also might be really different. So just being really clear about who you're designing, who you're focusing your benefit on would be helpful.
seeing, how do I connect from the site or to any of the bus stops? Because I do think, on Admiral crossing to the west side of Admiral, if you are coming up from that neighborhood, I believe it's a pretty significant distance before you're able
Yeah.
to cross. I mean, I
No, no.
remember attempting to cross on foot in that location. And so access to those bus stops in that vicinity, if you were to have those kind of context maps of how do I get around more broadly, public transit from Admiral down to Harbor, as well as what are those major bike connections. I think understanding, as Wendy was saying, who is your public who could move through this site, who would move from Harbor up to Admiral or vice versa, would be super helpful to our understanding of what is a useful public benefit for them.
And that I think needs just a better public engagement process to really understand the community, the neighborhood, like who they are. What are the existing like concerns, circulation, how do people really function around the site? Where do they park? Do they really even like use that street or not? Into what capacity? I think and bringing that into the design and these conversations, I think it's going to be very beneficial for us to also understand like the public benefit part of it. And
And we have 15 minutes.
I guess it's almost a question. I do this kind of, not affordable housing, but I do housing. And it's challenging to get it to pencil on a flat site. And then this one, you have like a 40-foot retaining wall. Has that been engineered and priced? Because that just seems like that would be a project killer
Yeah,
or even a luxury project.
we also have to hold the building down.
Yeah, and probably liquefaction zone.
Yeah, we have to buy it together.
Yeah,
It's
so
structurally very complicated.
how does that make, it seems very challenging to pencil an affordable housing project, no matter,
Absolutely
let's
correct.
say yes.
We do not have a bid for it, but we do have a preliminary engineering for it. We got to talk through what the right way to do that is. Value engineer it from day one, as best we can, but it is a huge cost, there's no doubt about it. The whole pro forma, I mentioned this earlier, is, it's very hard to deliver this type of project, as Brad mentioned. And, separating the building probably makes it infeasible. We haven't proven that, but we probably could if we needed to. So yeah, you're right. That's a big challenge. There's a number of other challenges with the project, but that's one of them.
With two buildings, you do get a lot more, I mean, it's probably more expensive, you get higher quality units, because you have more surface area that can face each other. You have a street down the middle of it, you're adding extra
A lot more
cost.
story.
Yeah,
Now you have to turn it around.
no, I would just kind of, I think that's my comment, it just seems really hard to me. I don't know, I don't know. how it's
And
feasible
there
in
might,
any
I think maybe just to tag on to that, there might be some study of like kind of a halfway option where there's a portion of the building that you can pass under, right? So you still only have 2 stairs and 2 elevators, or maybe there's a version where it's like, you're kind of stepping the roof form, so you have some single loaded corridor on the bottom levels, some on the upper levels, but you're not using the average grade plane, right? Like you're having a stepped form or something, which, might be a lot cheaper than the 20-foot deep retaining wall. I mean, I don't know, obviously, but there might be other ways to achieve the same intent at the same or less cost, to kind of get that connection through where the right of way is right now.
And the public benefit, I think there's at least something for the neighborhood to the upslope neighborhood. There's a stair connection, I guess, but it feels like the building should make some sort of.
Right, like, are you allowed to go? Yeah, anyway. I mean,
So I feel like our
yeah.
esteemed architects are moving to land use and urban form, which is great, because I think we do want to get there. But I just want to go down the list. So I think access and circulation, I think we're good. Utilities, any red flags that come up for anybody? I didn't hear any during the question and answer.
I mean, that turnaround seems like the only.
Yeah, I think,
approach,
I think that's where things have to function.
Yeah.
Is where it's planned.
Are there public utilities down that right away?
That's a great question. I
Might
don't,
be sewer.
are there any public utilities in the right of way to be vacated?
I don't think there's anything now.
It's city.
Okay, I would guess, okay. Free speech, public assembly, I'm not really seeing much on that. Okay. Open space, I think we kind of already touched upon that with some of the earlier comments, which I think were good. And that definitely relates to public benefit. So anything else that people want to talk about there would be great.
This is a bridge of the space comment.
Okay.
I really haven't gotten the read from the other commissioners about this and even SDOT policy, but as we build up the 8-story city, looking around at the projects the last few years and those that are anticipated, this seems like a type of location where you might want to have a little more sidewalk, which means essentially that instead of a 10-foot patio, it would be an 8-foot depth patio. And to me, that would be 600 feet of public benefit, and is at least worth considering, because we don't think about this given its location, but when you think about trying to take a place like Harbor Avenue here and make it a place which is a pedestrian environment where people expect to have a car-free or car-light lifestyle, just a slightly wider sidewalk is a meaningful thing, which is, I can't speak to the market viability of an 8-foot depth for a patio as opposed to a 10, but I think I've seen them. And so just something, to me, that would constitute a public benefit.
Are you talking about the harbor?
On the harbor side?
Yes, the other side, the other side's another issue, but an interesting one, but I'm really just talking about like the character of Wagon Harbor as it is to become a much more pedestrian kind of place in Seattle.
Would that be like a dedication or just making the sidewalk wider?
Well, I don't know how the deal would work. I mean, you're not going to change the boundary of the right of way. So essentially you're kind of creating a 2-foot zone, which has been done in other projects. I mean, but it's a 2-foot zone, which is your kind of voluntary right of way. We're not being obliged to create it or unless it was through a kind of public benefits agreement. There's ways to manage that that I think are viable.
This is a 6-foot sidewalk currently, John?
I mean, the city requires 6 feet.
So there's a 6 foot.
Yeah, so you take the city requirement, you get in the planning strip, but it's like how to get a little bit more room.
Yeah, no,
You really
it's
want people to
Just
walk by each other.
clarifying the.
And I think that gets to the issue of back to circulation around it, that's a potential public benefit opportunity, along either street frontage, but particularly this one. I would just encourage the team to look at that. I think, and then light and air, I think just since we've already gone there, I think with light and air, what's generally really important for us to see in the public trust phase is what would a project look like without the vacation versus with the vacation. And I think what we would see without the vacation is we see an open space there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we just need to understand that better when it comes back, particularly at that public trust phase. Just maybe it's a better project, maybe it's a worse project. I don't know because we haven't seen the comparison, but I think we'll need to see that comparison.
But I think the concern voiced earlier is that there'd be no project, realistically.
Yeah,
And that's not to say, oh, you know, shoot, but just, I think realistically, the sites individually don't pencil, not today.
I think there's a story to tell there. I think it's worth us having the conversation about what would a project look like there? What are the existing benefits? Why can't it happen?
yeah, I think that's,
And therefore, this is the type of project that can happen. I think that's likely what council will need
yes, exactly.
to make their decision.
I think we'll need to know if a project really can't happen without the vacation, why, you know, we just need to understand. Because that's the first thing we look at, right, is with and without, and could it happen without, is it better or worse without?
Right.
And
we're
it's
looking
maybe
at
not. God.
We're looking at that question about what does the public lose in terms of open space. Council will also be looking at what does the public gain or lose in relation to housing.
Yep.
And I would say you are losing higher quality units if they can be constructed because you have units with higher access to light if you get two buildings. But if we're saying for these financial reasons, you couldn't ever have that anyway, I think that will be important for council to see, even as we review the access and open space between the two.
And then that also relates to urban form, like what's the urban form
Yep.
look like without?
I mean, I think it behooves at least one study. It's not necessarily either or, right? Like there could be
Yeah.
an option with
Or
connected bridges where
a
you
different way to
know,
do
or,
it.
you know, a portion, a scheme where you have an entry on both sides and there's connection between the, you know, it's not 100% one or the other, right?
It can be at a diagrammatic level.
Yeah.
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 Very
Like, yeah, I mean, I understand all the difficulties, you know, but it's not just two buildings or one building, right? There are ways to you know, kind of
blocks or something.
Yeah, or, you know, whatever it is, right?
Breaking the facades, maybe not necessarily central courtyard, but something like that bring more light or just a variation of.
Out of curiosity, what would the process be to bridge across the actual right of way? If it was that?
Well, if it was over the right of way, or if you're just proposing a vacation and connecting the buildings over the vacated right of way would be a conversation we'd want to have. It would depend on what kind of a connection you were proposing, and it might mean that if you're looking at something that we might classify as a sky bridge, that then you would be working with Amy and looking at a sky bridge connecting two private buildings. But
And the good news is you still get to come to us.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I'm not suggesting,
that.
I'm not suggesting not pursuing the vacation.
I don't think.
I'm just suggesting that there could be ways of treating it that make the vacation more palatable.
Or maybe it's a 4-story plinth and
Yeah.
then or on top of either side or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think the vacation clearly makes sense for a lot of reasons, right? It's just.
Yeah, I think it's particularly challenging, but this is called City View Street.
We did notice that.
And there will not be a city view.
I'm sorry.
Poorly named.
Wow.
And then any other comment, we only have a few minutes left, but any other comments about either land use urban form or about the public benefit package, like planters? We talked about a little bit. The applicants talked about enhanced bike rack design. I mean, any comments on any of the public benefit item to us?
I would just like more, you know, I know it's preliminary, just more detailed drawings, you know, so you have a section through the site that shows the grades and West Seattle storage, the West Coast storage, whatever it's over there. And connection to the bike or to the bus stops and bike routes, just sort of that level of just showing us all that connectivity. Great.
I had a comment about the courtyard. Can you share the dimensions of it?
You mean a proposed courtyard?
I don't know how to do this. We can guess, hang on. We can give you a pretty good. So it's like 30 by 45, probably, something like that.
I was wondering what it
Somebody
was.
guessed that over there?
I was a little short, but I was getting close, yeah.
I mean, if your scale is correct, then it's not that. If your-
I'm going to the property line.
Oh, yeah, I didn't go the
Oh,
property
that's-
line.
So it's like, it looks like it's like 16 feet wide, maybe.
No, the
I
units,
think it's
the
deeper.
units are
It's
50.
2 units wide.
I think the scale's not.
Oh,
Scale
on.
it.
Yeah,
think the
if you
scale's
look-
showing
I
double.
was measuring it, it's easier to
Yeah,
measure it when
that
it
makes
has the
sense.
paving lines on it, because if you know the
Otherwise, they're
sidewalk is
equal.
6 feet, that was my measure.
Units are 50.
I think the comment I would have there, and, there's a number of street and alley dedications that have included private public plazas, right? I mean, it's not an uncommon public benefit. I think then the question always is, how does this feel public, right? How does the public know they can access it? Does the public want it? It gets back to the public engagement process. Is that considered of value to the broader public? So I think we would want to understand, I think all of that when this comes back to the public benefit discussion, if that's going to be part of the package. Does that make sense?
A very quick thing, which we already talked about, but it would be great to, I think we'll need to understand like the level of affordable housing in the building the next time it comes back. If we can just mention that early, that would be.
I think, yeah, I guess maybe a friendly amendment to that. I just want to I think we all want to understand the level of affordable housing, but how much of it a factor is it in our deliberation? Particularly on the public benefits. I think that's what I really want to understand and clarify.
Yeah.
Is it relevant at all to that question? Is it relevant to the public trust question? Because that is.
I think that's an internal discussion, right?
Yeah.
We need to figure that out.
Okay, I'm gonna try to wrap up unless there's any other burning comments. And then we want to ask the design team if they have any questions for us about any of this. But first of all, we'd like to thank the project team for the presentation on 3257 Harbor Avenue Southwest. Knowing this is early, but I think there are project elements and issues that we think need some further refinement and clarity, and I'll just try to summarize those. I think we need to, for the stairs on Porter, I think we need to understand how is that a public benefit? How is it going up over and above what would be required anyway? Is there a way to make that more accessible? Is there a way to make the viewpoint better or in a different location? I think then it gets around that issue with the Porter Avenue side, then it gets to the broader, is that a better location for public open space and access as you think about public benefit there as opposed to where you have it? If there is public benefit for any of that in the building, or then how does the public know that they can use it? How is it clear to the public that it's something that they can access? I think sort of understanding if planters are part of this, how is that really a public benefit? Is it something that the public wants? I think generally with regard to what the public wants, I think we would all like to see more public engagement around that question and presume that will be part of the process moving forward. What does the adjoining neighborhood value most in terms of the, but I think Wendy's point, how broad is that public outreach? I think that's something we'll want to understand. I think in terms of access and circulation, thinking about, is there a public benefit that could include a wider sidewalk like Ray said at Harbor, access improvements to get people to Admiral ultimately and where some of the bigger transit stops are. I think with regard to bulk and scale and open space, I think we will need to see for the public trust, we'll need to see a without vacation versus with vacation, and maybe Ruben was suggesting some nuanced options there, even potentially with regard to building design, that would be something that would be helpful. I think the light and air issue will be relevant at the public trust phase because this is a pretty bulky building with some of the interior units maybe not having a lot of light. So I think that's something that would be helpful to understand better when this comes back to us. And then I think with regard to the courtyard, if that is ultimately part of the public benefit, like again, understanding better the dimensions, where it is and where the best place for that would be. And then how do we signal to the public that that's something that space that they can use in some way, shape, or form. I think those were the main comments and recommendations I heard today. Other commissioners, did I miss anything?
I heard one that
Yeah.
you didn't mention, Ben talked about, even though the main entrance is on Harbor Side, how is the building really integrating into the neighborhood on the 30th Ave
Yeah,
side?
that's-
But so it's not just the back of a building?
Yeah.
Because that's a neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that's.
And the only other thing, and I don't know that you necessarily put a fine point on this, Evie, you were talking about if you have the staircase coming down, what is the role of an improved corridor as part of your open space strategy? Like there's something there in terms of public benefit. I don't think you were saying what that was, but there's something there that I think you could explore.
And then I think with regard to public benefit, just we've said it already, but I think it's really helpful for us. And I think the best street and alley vacation presentations do this. Here's what the code requires. Here's what we're doing over and above that. You know, whether it's on Harbor Avenue, whether it's on the staircase, whether it's just showing us that very, very clearly is something we'll want to see.
And on top of that, here's what the neighborhood or the community or the public is saying that they are interested in. And here is how that is showing up in our decisions for public benefit.
So is there, just back to,
I have-
anything we've said that you need more clarity on?
I have one question. It seemed natural to me that the carve out would be responsive to the location of the city view right of way. Is that something that, it seems like that felt kind of flat. I'm just kind of curious, is that my reading?
To me, it
That's fine.
did, because across the street, you have a huge, public storage building where I've never walked along it, but as I drive by, it doesn't feel particularly inviting. So you're creating this space. It doesn't have like great light, can't really see anything from it. To me, it doesn't resonate with like a really important
Also,
location.
I think it's one of those things that as designers, it's a conceptual thing that no one else really understands. Like the people that live in that building aren't going to understand that there's
Used to
an
be a right of way.
unvacated right of way there,
But they might, depending on what we did.
but not on
Yeah.
that side.
Well, maybe,
Not
I mean, I think
from-
maybe they would if you somehow connected it back to the upper side, because then the city line or city street, city view goes up the road, but on the backside, you make it's just a flat wall, so you don't really recognize it.
There's
Yeah, being a
hill climb there.
Right, if there were a hill climb, or if you had, coming from the west, you had an entry on that location, it would read as a legible continuation of the right of way. Whereas there's nothing down at Harbor that tells you it's a continuation of any right.
And so out of curiosity, if there was a successful connection in that location, could that respond to the comments that were made about Porter? Because I think it'd be very hard to do it on Porter. I think it'd be very difficult
Yeah,
because there are
I
going to be
personally
garbage
think
trucks.
I think
and
it-
there's going to
Yeah.
be neighbors,
I think it
there's
could
going to
be,
be cars turning around and parking, and it's not going to feel very.
I mean, part of that comment is because if you're required to do that, it's to have some unmasked kind of significance of what the public benefit is, right? And so if you can do that in a different location, and then there's something significant there, which could be fleshed out at that notch, right? But in meaningful ways that, respects building form, like air. Yeah.
And I didn't want to, I don't mean to say that it's not important to make it pedestrian friendlier on Harbor View, that's all. I just don't.
And I do think that the notch itself is nice for the project.
Oh,
Like
yes.
it makes a nicer building to have that notch. It just doesn't necessarily feel public.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to see the project at this stage, and if it moves forward, we'll look forward to seeing it down the road.
Thank you.
Thank you for the discussion.
Let me turn the recording off. And I think we can break to